Okay, I have this great wood vintage piece, and let's see 2 ways to sand off the top finish. Hi, I'm Sarah, and I am here to help you learn how to flip furniture. So we have this great solid wood piece. Sometimes these pieces are going to have a laminate top, but this one actually is wood. And so we are just going to take off the original finish. So I just have an orbital sander here. It is hooked up to a shop vac so that we're indoors. It's collecting all the dust. And I'm using an 80 grit to start. So let's get going. Try to put even pressure on your sander here. Don't push too hard. Let the sander do the work for you with that 80 grit. Okay, so we have done about half, so hopefully you can kind of see this. This half is done, sanded down with 80 grit. This over here we haven't finished yet. This sanding was taking a long time. So we are gonna try and switch with a carbide scraper. So a carbide scraper is a handheld tool. It has a blade that kind of gets inserted into here. And you're not gonna put it flat down. You use it a little bit as an angle, and we're just gonna pull the finish. So you're using it 2 hands. Need some elbow grease. There we go. Okay, so you can see here, I started to remove some of the finish. So this goes quicker. It does require some elbow grease, but you're not going to need to use the 80 grit here. And then when you see, you're just pulling off these shavings. And then this you just either vacuum up or you put right in the garbage. Okay, so we have both sides done. We have our 80 grit sanded side, and then we also have our carbide scraper side. So the carbide scraper is not going to be as perfect. It might look like a little bit streaky, but that's generally okay. You just want to remove that top layer of finish. So now we're going to swap out to 120. So the way that you want to use the grits of the sandpaper is you want to make sure that you're going from a lower grit and then you're increasing, and you're not increasing too much. So I prefer these nets over the actual paper. This was our 80. We're putting on our 120, and that should be kind of the next grit after the 80 and after the carbide scraper. So let's get to sanding. Something else to keep in mind when you're sanding is you're generally going to go back and forth in the direction of the grain. You generally are not going to sand against the grain ever. Okay, so we just sanded the whole top with 120. So again, as a reminder, this side we used an 80 grit to remove the old finish. This side we went with a carbide scraper. So the 120 grit on the 80 grit really smoothed it out. The 120 grit on the carbide scraper side really helped remove any of the rest of the finish that was still there. So now we're gonna go in with either a 180 or a 220 grit. Because again, when you're sanding something, you ultimately want to start at a lower grit. So we started at the 80, we went to a 120. Now again, we're gonna go 180 or 220. You wanna go from a lower grit to a higher grit, and you don't wanna jump too much. It should really be pretty progressive. So let's go sanding. Okay, so nice and smooth. Comment below if you have any questions.